We are about to begin Adventure Foray into React hooks, which are like this, see? No, not really. But I was wondering, raise your hand if you ever if you know what are React hooks, more or less. I don't expect. Okay, so I need to be careful in what I say. That is, raise your hand if you actually already use React hooks in production. Yeah, well, I see like 1 every 10 people from before, yeah. So, which is good in a way, and it makes sense. We will see there is a reason for that. So React hooks are, I can, big spoiler here, are something which is pretty cool, it's pretty convenient, but they are by far not mandatory. So if you learn them, that is cool, not big rush. I will recommend to go there in due time. They are pretty convenient to have, but yeah. Let's move, and how many hooks do you think they are available for us? Do you have an idea? 1, 2, 3, how many options do we have? Hundreds? No, well, that is a bit too optimistic. Luckily, no. The documentation is not so demanding to challenge. Anybody? Something less, but yeah, getting there. Yeah, okay, good approximation. First of all, we will focus on a few essential ones, in particular use state and use effect. Maybe some of you might notice I'm partially recycling the slides that I did for our talk about React hooks, and that was meant to last 1 hour. We were already struggling, me and Fabio, the other co-contributor for this kind of slides, which I still thank. We decided to, given the amount of time, only one of us is going to talk. Fabio is too muscular and he will take all the podium, so I went there for this reason. Use state, use effect, we're going to see that. Use contest, that I strongly recommend you. If you are already familiar with the new contest API, I think using the use contest hook is like perfect, is a very good use case. They are both pretty recent, so you might start putting them in your code like that. And there is a few more. So I don't know, all in all, they are like a dozen or something, yeah. I would share the slides. It's not bother not if you are not able to read everything at once. Well, some of them are I think are pretty intuitive. Use the reducer, you can get what kind of contribution can give. Memo is also pretty cool if you're using the new Memo API and so on, but let's not go too much into this depth, luckily, because that is only so much that we can do in this amount of time. Well, what would they do? Well, they can give us a lot of features which before we could get only in class components, still using functional components, which is nice as long as you stick to 2 very simple rules. Don't deviate from that, otherwise you will go in deep trouble. First of all, hooks needs to be outside on the top of the level, and don't put them in loops, don't put them in conditional, and they should always be in the same order, okay? Don't use them outside of functional components. That is also going to be kind of messy. I don't know, actually, to be fair, if the latest update of ESLint now is going to give you some warning in this regard. If it doesn't, you're in for some big trouble. You can try in your own spare time, but I will not recommend it. Again, the extra rules they are optional. Don't feel forced to use them. And I think there are a few good use cases for them, but let's move on. Let's focus on use state and use effect, the one that I mentioned before. The first one allows us to add a state to a function component, which is pretty cool. I think everybody which has used React for like a couple of hours, not even being a junior, knows that you can, before you could get state only in a class component, not in a function component, not any longer. Use effect will allow us to mimic most of the convenient lifecycle methods for us to use, so that is also nice to know. Let's move on and see a typical use case. I wrote here the silliest component I could think of, a button component. Super simple, function component. As you can see, it's taking props, and from the props we expect a class name, an Onclick event, a text, and we proceed like that. It's all super clean and super nice, and it works pretty fun as long this happens usually when you get some change requirement, which, when something is perfect, super simple, super harmonic, that means that it's very likely to change. You have a designer, you have a manager, somebody which is asking you to modify because they want something fancy, and that is what happens. If I need to do something as in describing, so supporting, say, multiple text in this case, which needs to be, I know, you might pass some prop which tells you to use pass a different text and so on. Let's say we go for our own flavor of a solid principle, so we want our component to have this kind of logic all on its own, and let's do things this way just for the sake of example. You will think that, okay, I can put a state which is silly, it will just have a true or false or whatever, and we'll keep track when I need to display text 1 or text 2. As simple as that. This is the approach that we might get going the traditional way. I assume it's readable for everybody, otherwise tell me, I will try to zoom, but it should be fine. And you see that basically I created a class with a constructor, with a render, and so on. So it's all fine, okay? You see the code bloated, doing this kind of conversion. And did you notice there are at least 3 errors above? Which happens, yeah? Extra cookies if you spot more than 3, but there could be. The point is, as a general rule of engineering, the more you write, the more you're likely to put bugs, particularly when you lower your guard, when you refactor something. We tend to be a bit more sloppy, let's be honest, in this regard. Also, do you really like pain? I'm not judgmental, maybe you like it, but consider also with this approach you share pain with all the team. So I don't know if it's a team of masochists and so on. I don't know then how you're doing selection in your company, but you might skip in that regard. And let's see how we can achieve the same using the hook way, which is nicer, we'll say. Yeah. So what we see as difference compared to the button component, the functional component before. First of all, we import something else with the user state there on top, okay, directly inside the React. And then we call it in the very first line, and we will, with this format. We call user state, we pass the initial value that we want to have, in this case it's true, and using the structuring is going to give us 2 things. The variable, which is going to be assigned, which is associated with this hook, and the setter for it, okay? As easy as that. You call it default value, and you get 2 things back, but you can easily destructure using array destructuring. Then, well, we are going to create our own Onclick function, and this is what we do. Our Onclick now is going to, first of all, trigger our own hook, calling set save and switching from time to time. When it's false, it's going to be true, and the other way around. And finally, we are actually going to call props.onclick. If you notice, this part is almost the same. We just change the onclick event. So it's also more convenient because we are not going to refactor a lot of stuff in the middle. We are just going to add something on top, and we keep the core logic. We are still returning that. It's still a class component. It's simplified. There is not too much to care. And let's see if we can do that live. Now, this was the big challenge. The point is, I already done this presentation before. Apparently, the audience was pretty happy with it. Other than my friends, all my friends, oh, this sucks. Last week we have been to another presentation where they were doing live coding, it's so much better and so on. Okay, thank you. Nice to have friends like that. Incidentally, nobody of them came to this night, so okay, that is even nicer. But as they say, with friends like that, who needs enemies? So let's see our very simple component. I done this example. So our app using REPL is readable, is big enough, hope so. So what happens? Basically, when I click, it just increases the counter, okay? I declare a state, there is only a counter variable. This is my onclick, which increases counter by 1 every time, and that's about it. As easy as that. Again, an evil manager comes in and asks us to support something. Our button now should take an array of text, and all of them should change regularly. So, okay, we can comment this out. So let's put out our button for the moment. And let's consider our own multi-text button now. Okay? Is it clear how it works? It works exactly like the same, it's just expecting an array of text messages, but we need to progress one through the other. So we are going to import it later. Now let's create a file. Come on, file, be created. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there it is. So let's take what this is doing as a template. Okay, so this was our old school button component. We are going to change it now. It will get an upgrade to multi-text button. And I really suck at typing. So let's proceed as we said. First of all, we import user state, okay? Fine. Then let's expand a bit this function. We don't want it to be any longer something which directly returns. We need it to be a bit more sophisticated, let's say. So we return proper indentation, which apparently is not a feature in yeah. Is it properly indented? No, you're not. Now you're. I feel better. And then, if you remember, we needed to make our call to user state, okay? So let's say we call the property clicks. Yeah, I know, I'm very creative. And then we want to call the setter, set clicks. We initialize with the first value, which is 0. Yeah. Then we declare our own Onclick function, which is going to supersede the previous one. Well, it's not taking any parameter because we are a bit sloppy, we don't care. If we pass an event, we are going to ignore it. And first of all, we are going to set clicks. Okay, and finally, we are going to actually call the original onClick, what you're going to replace before we wrap it in our own magic. And this looks like it should work. Feel free to tell me if you spotted anything wrong. I know a lot of you just want to do that. Oh, of course, we just needed to put the proper logic there. So what we need to do now? Now text is going to be an array. And what we want to do? Well, we want to call the element which is number clicks. Because we want to cycle, we want to use the modulus. So we are going to use props.text.length, which is spelled this way. Okay? So let's see what happens when I comment this one and then comment this other one. Compile successfully. Well, it doesn't look so much. And okay, restart. Sometimes you need that. Okay, it was working. Yeah, let's see if things work as expected. Yeah, it does. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know. I was very brave and very courageous, and I was waiting a lot, but I wanted to call a stuntman, but I decided to do. So is everything clear? Let's look another bit to our own component. So let's look at the original component, okay? Super simple, the silliest button component we can think of, and all in all was approximately 11 lines, okay? So we also get an idea. Not properly indented. Indentation. Sorry, it's my OCD. I need to. And this is how it looks now. So we move up to 19 lines. Is acceptable, I would say. Not too much complication. Don't ask me to do the conversion to class component, but trust me that it's more likely to be much bigger. Okay. And to recap, first of all, we import user state. We use it in the very first line of our function component. In this specific case, we also create our own function to wrap it and to do what we want. So just to call first the setter of the hook, then we call the actual function, and this is what we get. See? Apparently our button likes Spain, so maybe you would have preferred a class component, but still. And there we are. So, did you notice 3 errors above in this one? No, probably also because there were no errors. And again, it's more concise, it's, I think, also more readable. I know readability is always a weak argument. I always tell to other team members, it doesn't make more sense if they say, well, for me this is more readable or not. If I were born in China, probably for me Chinese would be more readable than English, but you need to think of some middle ground. Now, use state takes away, so what we've seen. It can give you state like a class component right out of the box, as easy as that, without a painful conversion. Can replace the use of constructor when you just use it to set the state, which is convenient. Can replace the use of get the right state from pros with some little trick, link. I'm not going that in there at the moment. Always generated in that format, always is stable, and so it will become more readable. Again, once you get the habit, it doesn't take much. I think we played with hooks for a couple of days and we were already pretty familiar. And by pretty familiar means, okay, I can build something without running to check the documentation all the time. It doesn't, and probably if you are smarter than me, which it doesn't take much, you should be able to get there in a couple of hours, say. Can be composed also outside of a component. That is for composition, not for use. We are going to use an example soon. Remember, you need to use them inside a component, otherwise you get trouble. What are you creating outside? In that case, there are custom hook, which can be convenient because think how many times you have some kind of logic which is going to change a state, and how painful and annoying was it to bring it outside because you want to recycle the same kind of logic in multiple components. So oftentimes you just need to pass state, to pass a reference to say state. You need to do a few tricks which can be annoying. Or you rebind, but you don't want to rebind too much, and so on. Quickly, let's give also a look at the use effect, so at least you get an idea. Big surprise in the first line, we import use effect as we are importing use state, which is still there, okay? In the first line, we are going to set a use state hook, which is going to take the time and to create a set time setter. Use effect is going to do some kind of magic, so it's going to declare timer timeout and to set a timeout all the time. I know it's not the best example, but still works for what we needed to do. There is also a return statement. We are going to check in the next slide what it does. And at the end of the line, if you want to try this kind of code, regrettably we don't have time, but I'm going to share this code in the comments of the meetup. We will see that it works just fine. So we created this very simple timer component that we can recycle and use everywhere we need. We were discussing about doing something which can change our state that we can export and so on. Well, gentlemen, useTime is a custom hook. So it's a function which allows us to do some changes. You see, I declare it outside a function component, but I will use it inside a function component. So the rule is respected and everything should work just fine. Now, was it so hard? Well, maybe a bit, but not as much as I would have expected. Takeaways. We can get lifecycle methods of a class component right out of the box, which is nice. More specifically, we can replace component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount. The last one is triggered when you return something with inside use effect. So let's look for a moment. So this return, clear timeout, and so on, that is what you will do when you do component will unmount. Boom, directly there. Doesn't take so much to learn. Documentation is pretty good again. Component decatch and get derivative state from error are the only ones you cannot replace. You still need a class component according to official documentation. Should component update requires React memo, which is maybe for another talk. You can do that. And if you want to do some optimization and you don't want to trigger render all the time and so on, you can pass an optional array with all the parameters that you don't want to, with all the values that you don't want to consider for a re-render, which is, again, I link some examples, so you might look into that. This function, in case you are very keen on getting the maximum performance, is called after the paint. So if you want something which triggers, which is triggered before the painted, go for use layout effect, which is another hook with a very specific use case. So let's recap with general takeaways. Don't force their adoption. So please, tomorrow don't go in your team, in your company and say, oh fuck, I think the hooks are super cool, let's refactor everything, I don't want to see a single class component anymore in my life. No, well, they were not meant to do that. If you read the official React documentation, they suggest the same. They actually might give you some performance improvement in the future. Well, so Facebook is promising now. Because class component, when you compile, when you create a bundle, they can give you some problem. If Dan Abramov had done a long technical discussion about that. So if you try to keep as much as possible as a function component, you can also get a smaller and more efficient bundle, which is nice. But then again, unless you really need to do something like a gaming or, I don't know, you need to display contact list of 1,000 of items and so on. If performances are not killing your app, don't go there and say, oh, with the React hooks you can get so much better. No, sadly not. Don't panic also. The opposite is also true. It's not like you're going to be obsolete. I'm not ever going to find a job unless I learn a React like hooks, like if I were the gospel. No, that is not even the case. ESLint is supporting them decently. It's still a work in progress. As I mentioned, there were a few parts that I'm not sure now if they trigger any kind of errors or warning, but they're going pretty fast. And same for TypeScript and Flow. They're already more than compliant. To be fair, I tried to investigate multiple times, so I don't find any indication about that about Reason, but raise your hand if you ever used Reason. Wow, oh, wow, in the previous talk there was one person. You are proliferating, okay, but, it's spreading. But, later we talk and you tell me how you like it. I never play with that, I'm curious. Hook component work as usual, okay. We might actually look into that if we go back to our own small experiment, if you have a bit of time. And custom hooks can be tested in components. So they still allow for test. As you were testing before, it doesn't require you again to learn any more specific technology. At least as long as you use them with Jest. Jest is the one I used. Maybe there is some other tricky use for more specific suite, but I don't think so because we should know. Eat healthy, sleep regularly, and follow the rule of hooks. Be sure to do that. Don't put them inside condition loops. You're going to go in a lot of pain otherwise. Question or boo in time. And again, credits also to Fabio, which contributed and helped me create the slides together. So a round of applause in case it will go to him and not to me. Yeah, question time.